Okay, so just jumping over here. So here's what we're talking about today, compiling your folio. And I've said to you before, think of your folio as a timeline, like really 6 weeks of time. Okay, 4 lessons a week for 6 weeks, okay? What happened in that time? Well, your folio tells the story of that, okay? And it shows not only what you did, but what you learned and what you thought and everything along that line. So it should clearly describe where you began in regards to your research project. It should show the development of your understanding. So here's what I knew at the beginning versus here's what I knew at the end. That being said, elements of your folio are always changing. Okay, so there's going to be bits and pieces that are going to be always refining and changing. So showing revisions and notes of changes is also really important. So it's not uncommon that people refine or change their research question or change their proposal, or, you know, originally I thought this was going to be the most valuable thing, but it turns out I couldn't get that, so therefore I had to change, you know. So showing the revisions and changes is part of the deal here, okay? It's actually not about showing a really polished, perfect, you know, this is what I said I was going to do and everything I said I was going to do went exactly as the way I thought it was going to go and I'm perfect. You know what I mean? It's actually about showing the growth and the development. Okay, so just keep that in mind. When we talk from a moderation point of view, these are sort of the key questions. What did you do and why? What decisions did you make and why? How have you developed in skills and understanding and why have you developed? You know, so it's that constant, you just have to constantly come back to that. What did I do and why? Okay, if you can answer that question and show it in detail, that's what the marking is all about. Okay, remember, it's not about showing this perfect understanding, it's about showing development. Okay, so what we want to know is how things are developing and why are they developing. Okay, that's the focus of the folio. Okay, it's not actually about the knowledge, that comes in the outcome, so keep that in mind. I just created this kind of image or this graphic just to illustrate a couple of important things to you. Just first and foremost, you know that you're being marked on your planning and refinement. Okay, you're being marked on your skills and the development of your capability. You're being marked on your developing knowledge and understanding. So these are sort of the 3 areas that you're looking to show. So this is kind of where you started, and this is where you're going to be at the end of next week, ready to begin your outcome. Okay, so what happened between here and here? So just notice the way I've kind of laid this out. So in showing your planning and refinement, you might start by telling us how you came up with your idea, how you plan to use your time, but later on down the track you might be showing us refinements to your idea, reflections, further reflections. Okay, so that planning and refinement thing never really finishes. You're always sort of coming back and revising and thinking back and going and reflecting on the initial plan you had versus what you actually did, all of that stuff. We've talked here about your initial considerations about the skills, where you saw yourself. You know, when I gave you that lesson about capabilities, I said, where do you picture yourself in alignment with that capability now versus where do you see yourself at the end? Okay, so what should be shown here? Things that challenged you or changed your perspective. Like if there's something in there that you think, wow, that's actually really pushed me or made me think differently, or I've had to expand my vocabulary, like things that made you stop and think, you should be capturing. How skills developed and challenged, evidence of how you built your capability, reflection on how your skills have developed. So being really clear and making it obvious to the person who's reading your folio where and how that's happening. Yeah? Okay, because if you just say, oh look, I'm perfect and I did everything and I didn't learn anything, well then that's not really what we're looking for, is it? Okay. Last one here, knowledge and understanding. So think about, and I showed you this in a previous lesson about developing your research and understanding. Like what did you know originally versus what happened? How did you refine things? Like key findings that clarified your understanding, key questions that helped you unlock things, what information accessed and what you learned from things. So just thinking up here, this just goes to show this is the combination of all the different things that you can be using in these areas to show your development. Reflections obviously is in all 3. The proposal, your Lotus diagram, SWOT analysis, that's all evidence of planning and refinement. Source analysis stuff is all, kind of knowledge and understanding development. Okay, are we all kind of all right with that? What you can sort of see, or what I've kind of tried to do here, and it's not a perfect model, but you don't present this in 3 sections. They're interchangeable, aren't they? So I started here, and then I did this, 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 and then I did this. So your pages actually should be in sequence of the story that you're telling, okay? It's really important to make you aware that there is no set way to hand up the folio, and that's deliberate because part of that is a problem that you need to solve, okay? But what I've said is if you're unsure, and I know there's a lot of people who are unsure, and there's people who've done their source analysis and they've done this and they've done that and they've got all this stuff, but it's like 50 different documents at the moment, or they're just not sure how to bring it all together, okay? So if you're not sure, I want to talk to you today about some steps that should hopefully give you some guidance about how I think you could best organise your information. And I'm the person marking it, okay? So I guess I'm just trying to give you some hints about what I might be looking for or what I would regard to be clear evidence. The folio, just be really conscious, I've said this to you before, the folio does not have to be written. And I'm going to give you a real spiel about this in a couple of weeks' time about the outcome. The outcome doesn't have to be written. You don't have to write a 2,000-word essay. Okay? It could be a video or something multimodal. And that suits some people so well. That's what I would do if I was in your shoes. So it can include images and videos, and I've just said, look, just talk to me. If you've got that stuff and you want to include it and you want to kind of figure out how to go about it, please talk to me. Okay, I'm not going to talk about that right now. All right, so I put these dot points together, okay, just as a bit of a guide. So first and foremost, like I said, if you're just looking for hand it up in the form of a document, okay? Make it either a Word document or a Pages document or a Google document, whatever, okay? But think of it as sort of one document. Make sure the information is in order. So I actually want to see the story. I want to see it in what we call chronological order. What did you do first, second, third? And even with your source analysis, I should see what you read first, what you read second, what you said, because I want to see your developing understanding. Does that make sense? Now here's really important, okay? This is just the absolute killer in any way that you do it. Subheadings and titles to direct us towards what we're seeing. Don't just give me stuff and expect me to figure it out. Okay, I want to see everything dated and labelled. You know, this is what this is what that is, this is what this is, here's what, you know, here I'm doing a reflection of my first source. Here I am doing a reflection on my capability. Here I'm considering the next point that I'm going to go after looking at, you know, all of that kind of thing. So give me lots of stuff. There's no limit on pages, so let me be really clear on this because I know a few people have got mixed messages. There is no limit on pages that you give to me, okay? The purpose and content of each page, however, should be really clear. Okay, so titles, like label each page, make sure, don't just give me like a nothing page, you know, where I'm like, what is this? It's like incomprehensible drawings and scribble, I don't know what it is. If it's something like that that doesn't make sense on its own, don't hand it in. You know what I mean? Like if it's just going to confuse me, don't give it to me. Okay, so you just think about how you organise these things. Make sure you use page numbers. Preferably, and just get in the habit of doing this, like if you can do kind of a 1 of 2, you know, 1 of 3, 1 of whatever, is helpful too. You've seen this in the exemplar, but I think this is a good way to go about it as well. Use colours. You know, use colours to actually demonstrate different types of information to me, and I'll show you what that looks like. Maybe green, like capability information, anything about capabilities is maybe green. Or maybe blue is anything about developing understanding. Maybe red is refinements or changes. You know, that's a really easy way to differentiate. And also when you're forming your folio, it gets you thinking about what am I actually aiming to show here. Okay, good strategy. And here's my basic order. Okay, so I reckon you should start with your proposal. Yeah? That's the first thing I put in there. And the reason is because the proposal is sort of the overview of everything that you want to do, isn't it? Okay? And for me, that's probably the best thing for me to read. Here's what I'm aiming to do, okay? So best to start with this because it outlines what you intend to do and your initial considerations. Some people have changed their topic or changed their focus and consequently changed their proposal, but that's okay. Give me your first proposal, show me what you did under that proposal, and then when you changed, then put in a new proposal, you know, like put in another kind of proposal in there. Now, it might be, I've mentioned to you before, for moderation, we work together to pick 10 pages that best capture your journey. And we might have a conversation of saying, look, maybe it's only worth sending one proposal because we've only got 10 pages, you know what I mean? But for the story that you're telling me, there's nothing wrong with giving me changes or variations of different documents, but put them in order. Like, if you read a source, similar to what I modelled, that completely changed your perspective of the question, and then you wrote a new proposal, I want to read that source and your reflections on it before I see the new proposal. Because if you put that new proposal at the top, I'm going to get all that out of whack. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. So start with your proposal. Evidence of refinement should come next. Okay, like how did you get your topic? You know, it's lotus diagrams, spot diagrams, table considerations. Evidence of planning, that's your timeline and stuff like that. If you're keeping a journal, okay, and I've mentioned to a lot of you, that's not a bad thing to do. I've just said I'd encourage splitting your journal actually into chunks though, making sure each entry is dated, and I'll show you what that looks like, but distribute them out. Then moving on to your source analysis stuff, you know, so you're kind of showing it to me in logical order, you know, from here's what I'm planning to do, here's how I got to that point, here's where I'm going to be spending my time, the decisions I'm making, here's the sources I've looked at, and here's some reflections and activities and elements that kind of show that. So these are all the different things you're going to be including. So, sat down last night and threw together this little baby for you, okay? And there's a PDF version attached to Daymap, okay, but there's also obviously a digital version attached here that you can look at, okay? I'm just trying to figure out what's going to be best for me to, see how we go. So here's my folio layout example. A couple of things. I wrote on here, this is my disclaimer, okay? And my disclaimer is, I kind of whipped this up in probably about an hour, okay? So it is not an A+ example. So I don't want you to say, oh, well in your example, you only wrote half a proposal. So that's what I did, okay? No. Yeah, everyone okay? So I just want you to be really clear. This is an example about how you might organise the sequence and collection of information for your folio. This is not a high standard example of effective research. The information is largely incomplete or ad hoc, like me just grabbing things and throwing them together. And elements like planning and information is incomplete or they lack detail and reflection. The reference list, I got to the end and I threw all my references kind of on there, but I didn't even lay them out properly. Okay, I didn't even kind of source them, all of that kind of business. Okay, I was getting really short on time. My phone starts to ring, my kids are going crazy, I have to get home. Okay, so just don't come back and say, oh, well, your reference. Okay, that's not the purpose. The other thing I said on here is, please note, I put this cover page here for the purpose of telling you this information, but I do not need a cover page from you. Cool? All right, so here's what we've got, all right? First and foremost, you know, having a header and things like that is important. So just make sure you get your SACE number and we know what it is, and page numbers down the bottom. So I started off with my initial proposal. I didn't finish this thing, but I just put together, you know, blah, blah, blah. Here's what the idea is. Here's the processes. Here's the research considerations, including ethical considerations. Here's my capability focus. And I've actually put down here a reflection. Now this is a reflection from kind of later on after I've done this, but I've included it here because it sort of shows some of the initial considerations I made around this. Okay, so you can see this was my initial proposal. It sought to look at how long humans have been in an area, and at the time I felt that setting up an interview, so if you're going to go up to my things here, like with my focus, I'm saying here, I feel the most important way to gain insight is from an active archaeologist, like from doing an interview. So I've just made this note here saying, at the time that I made this, I really thought that interview was going to be the most important thing, but actually I never got that interview. So I'm sort of like letting you know bits of the story as I go. I go on to my evidence of refinement and planning, okay? This might be different to yours. Like I said, I just threw all this stuff really quickly together. So here's my initial kind of evidence. Now look at this. Here's a discussion with Mr. Brown extract. I've gone back and I've listened to my audio recording and I've actually written out the conversation between myself and my teacher, which told the story of what I learned from this process. Yeah, so see how I'm not just giving you the evidence, I'm giving you the commentary on the evidence, and blue represents my developing understanding, okay? I go down here. Here's further refinement. Okay, and notice like the prior knowledge model, evidence of refinement and planning. Notice how I'm just labelling everything, I'm making it really clear. This is a model of a topic refinement that the teacher gave me. Here's what I did. This is my completed version of the model, and here's my reflection on what I learned from doing that. Yeah? Okay, so I never give you anything just like here's a table I made. I always tell you what the value of that thing was at the time, okay? So I've got reflections all throughout this thing. Here's my question refinement. Okay, I did this, and here I was speaking specifically about my capability of critical and creative thinking and things I thought about, you know, and I deliberately set this up so it actually showed less of an understanding of the capability than what you'll see later on down the track, because it's growing, but I dated it. My dates aren't ironclad, but you can see here I'm 5th of the 7th, so I'm kind of early July, okay? I go along to here, here's my research timeline, okay? As I mentioned, it's not very detailed, I just kind of whipped all this stuff together. But I even colour-coded some things that I put in place that were relevant to different things. And here's my journal extract. Look at this. Okay? So in my journaling, I might have said something that was kind of relevant to my planning process. So I've taken an extract from my journal. I haven't put the whole journal there. I've just taken an extract, which is relevant to sort of how I was using this. So you can see I got a bit stuck today trying to find sources to tell me what I had to do. It was annoying because I'd allowed a whole lesson to finding and reading a source, but after 40 minutes of searching, I didn't find anything, and that answered my question. And this has put my schedule behind. So this is, I'm actually showing you not only how I worked, but some of the problems I came across through my journaling in relation to how I did planning. Does that make sense? And then over here, I've got another journal extract here, okay, that's green, which says it's about my capability. And then I've got a reflection, like this is a timeline document that I use to record and update my progress throughout any research process. The version was really, the first version was basic, but I kept adding more detail, and I found that the tool worked much better for me when I wrote the outcome that I wanted to reach at the end of each day, as well as what I wanted to do. Okay, can you see my learning kind of from here? Now, this is just a quick thing I want to talk about in terms of pages, okay? So what I do, I've kind of got the page here, and this is dedicated to my research timeline. And obviously my reflections and stuff like that just went over the page, okay? And the rest of the page is blank, yeah? So I'm moving on to my next section here, but I just left it. So there's no, when you're giving it to me, it's fine to just space things out, you know what I mean? I don't want you, like when we talk about the 10 pages at the end of the semester, we'll look at how we kind of throw everything together, okay? But for this purpose of what you're giving to me, just spill over onto the next page. Don't spend 30 minutes trying to get it all to fit in like size 1 font. Just spill over to the next page and move on. Everyone cool with that? Okay. Source analysis, again, the structure of this is different to some of the stuff. Well, I haven't talked about the credibility of sources and stuff. I took this from my presentation I gave you about research development, and I took these reflection points from the same thing. Same thing here, reflection went over into the next page, so I just left the rest of that page blank and went down. Here's my source analysis, here's my reflection, here's Wikipedia, all of this kind of business. Here's my reflection. You know, I did that reflection about capabilities in terms of like posing questions. So it was at this point, and I modeled this to you before because I showed you all these different sources, and then I asked you that question, should I change my question? Do you remember that? Well, this is the point. It was after reading this that I really started to consider that. Okay, so I actually changed my question here, but I don't really mention that up above because I hadn't thought of it at the time. Does that make sense when I talk about the timeline and the order? So I go down here, here's my questions, and then what did I do? I revised my proposal. Okay, so on the 16th of the 7th, I revised my proposal. You know, notice the other stuff before was like the 2nd or the 3rd or the 5th of July. Now I'm in the middle of July, and I've used red to indicate what I changed. You know, I didn't change everything, but I did change these sections. So you can see here my revised proposal. Okay, and I might include there maybe a reflection of what I changed and why. Yeah, because my direction's actually changed. And just notice here, in order to address my question, I feel that building on the understanding and initial information I've read through simple sources has revealed, so I'm not starting from scratch here, I'm actually in my research process, I'm acknowledging that I've done some initial research and now my direction is to go this way. Yeah? So I'm sort of changing that up. You know, you can kind of even see here, the aim of my research project is to look at the extent that fossil materials can be accurately dated to determine the history of human occupation in Australia. I've chosen this topic because, and I've kept parts from my earlier proposal because the reasons I'm doing it are the same, but I've adapted some of these areas to be more specific to what I want to do, okay? We're almost at the end here. Here's then another source analysis, and look, I just said analysis information would be here, okay? You can bear with me here. Here's another one, analysis information. Here's another capability reflection. So this is where I set myself a specific task to look at my developing capability, and I reflected on that as well, okay? So you can see the function of each page is really clear. It's always labelled, it's always dated, okay? And you should be able to follow the dates through. Like here you can see today I set up a capability reflection where I looked at how my literacy skills have developed across the research process. I picked 3 journal entries, and you can see the dates of them, the 3rd of the 7th, the 15th of the 7th, and the 31st of the 7th. And here's my reflection of what I showed on each of those. Cool? And then down here, here's my reference list. And as I mentioned, please note, this is not, I just grabbed all my links and just kind of threw them in there, okay? Now, just as a side point, you will hand up, as I mentioned, when you hand up things, I want you to have a reference list. When it comes to the moderation side of things, and we talk about the 10 pages, the reference list does not count as those 10 pages, okay? So you will send a detailed reference list regardless. Does that make sense? And I've said to you before about referencing, the best way to do it is as you go, as opposed to going back and, oh, what was that website I looked at 6 weeks ago? Okay, that's going to drive you nuts, okay? Is everyone clear on all of that?
Yes.
Okay, so just a really good, clear example of exactly how you can lay out your work to submit to me. All good? Is there any questions about any of that?
How many source analyses would you want in our folder?
Okay, great question. Now I've said that the minimum should be 8. Okay, so 8 to 10 is sort of what we're saying is just a good sort of healthy number. There is no limit to how many you've got. But ultimately what we're talking about here is 6 weeks, aren't we? Okay, so what this should tell me is a story around how clearly that comes out. Now in terms of the complexity of your information and understanding, like what you actually report back to me, a lot of that is going to come out through your outcome. Yeah? So the quality of the answer that you actually determine is really marked by your outcome. In terms of the folio, what I want to see is the development of those sources. But as I said, if the minimum, or if everyone in the class is sort of doing 8 to 10, and you're a person who really wants to show that your attention to detail and focus and developing understanding was higher than the average, you know, then I think that, you know, anywhere between, it's hard to put a number on it, but if you're up around 20 or something like that, that's fine. Sound good? Okay. Good question though, Jordan. Any other questions about any of this stuff? Okay. So the reason I wanted to really go over this and share it with you today is because obviously you've got 2 weeks from now, or Friday next week, and it does take a bit of time to sort of organise stuff. Okay, if you, like I said, if you've got a document that's full of journal entries, you've got a recording of your discussion, you've got 6 Word documents with different source analysis, you've got a capability reflection, all of this stuff, it's probably going to take you maybe, I don't know, a few hours or an hour or 2 hours to just get it all together. I'd prefer, as I said, to sort of have it in one clear document so I can follow the process, and the clearer it is, the better. Everyone cool? All right, lovely.